We're very honored to have these guests with us to celebrate our opening of our retreat center and to Ajahn Pasanno to give the inaugural talk. And and it's very meaningful for me that we should have Ajahn Pasanno and Debbie Stamp here for this opening. And I want to first mention, can you hear okay? So I want to first mention Debbie Stamp. Was when I heard she was coming, I was delighted and felt I was right, that you should be here. And so it's very personally meaningful for me that she's here. And I think it's meaningful for us as a group. Debbie Stamp was part of our group before I was part of it in Palo Alto. So when I came there to start teaching, she was already there. And she was one of the caretakers in the degree to which there were such people in those early years. And together with a woman named Joanne Short, and remember a couple times we had dinner with her, right? It was very nice. And and then Debbie, in 1988, was one of the core people who dreamt up the idea of having a monastery, bring the monks from Chithurst out here to California. And they worked on that for several years, and eventually Abhayagiri was formed from her efforts. And when Abhayagiri was formed, she moved up there and left the Palo Alto area, moved up there. So I've known Debbie on and off for many years, and and is one of the people who I'm very inspired by you and your practice, and also by how you've been such a great, humble caretaker for the Dharma for all these years, and as far as I can tell, a very, very strong practitioner. I think you have to be in order to have, stayed so even through. And you've offered so much. You have so much wisdom. Every time I see you, it's been meaningful to see you. I feel inspired by you and your practice and what you do. So before I honor Ajahn Pasanno, I want to offer you a bow. And then for Ajahn Pasanno to be here, it's also very meaningful for me. In part because of who he is personally. I've been very inspired ever since I first met him by his practice and his wisdom and the way that he carries himself in the world. And it certainly puts me at ease when I'm with him, and in a way that feels appropriate for kind of what the Dharma is and the freedom of what the Dharma is. And the way that he holds himself without any, as far as I can tell, any conceit or any specialness, that he's like high-flouting abbot in one of the major Theravada monasteries in the West. You would never know. And a man of many, many years of practice. And here, I can kind of, little bit, with great respect, kind of make fun or laugh at it, but he is highly revered in Thailand. Maybe that's why he's here. And he's many, many years of great, great practice and great service of the Dharma and great wisdom. So to me, it's very personally meaningful to know him and to have him connected to our scene and connected to me. And I feel like who he is supports me in the Dharma in a great way. But also who he is as a monastic, and that the monastic lineage of monks and nuns down through the ages, that without them, we wouldn't be here today as a community, as a retreat center. Their practice, the way they carry the Dharma, the way they transmitted it down through the ages, has really been extremely important for all of us. And for us to be, for IMC and now IRC, to have some connection to the monastic community, Ajahn Pasanno and others, it's partly that it's our community. It's our wider community that supports us. It's the wider community that keeps an eye on us. I hope that Ajahn Pasanno and Abaya Gary will tell us if you see something about what we do here and our community doesn't seem quite aligned with the Dharma, that you would please let us know. And we ask that of you. And the sense of being supported and accountable to some degree to this community is something I think that's very meaningful and important as we go forward from here. We're not doing what we do here alone. We do it in this wonderful wider field of other teachers, monastics, and here in California, and Ajahn Pasanno represents that in a very important way for me, I think for us. And he also represents being a monastic, the lineage that we're part of, and supports us and carries us back into all the way back to the Buddha. And it's very important that, for me, that we have, we're not just inventing something on our own, but we're really the custodians of something that's been handed to us to care and love and to pass on to the next generation. And so in doing that, we're supported and by everything that Ajahn Pasanno stands for. So I would like to offer one bow to Ajahn Pasanno first. And then 3 bows through you to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha.
Pay a short homage to the Buddha and the Triple Gem, and then I'll begin speaking after. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So, what do you say after an introduction like that? There's, of course, many things are popping up in my mind as appropriate to follow up on.
Excuse me, Ajahn Pasanno?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not on. Do you see if the button's on? Let's do push it.
The blue button.
In the middle.
Blue.
Here.
There you go.
Okay. There we go. Okay, that'll keep people happy. So there's several themes that popped up in my mind that I think would be worth exploring. And of course, first of all, to express my appreciation to Gil for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to meet you all, see the place, and to be a part of this adventure of sort of the IRC, Insight Retreat Center. And I particularly appreciate the fact that Gil is wanting to establish this place as a place that functions on dana, And that, to me, is a very important example that is worthy of bringing into our culture. The opportunity to give, to share, to be a part of a whole culture of generosity is something that is I think really essential as a maturing of Buddhism coming to America. On a certain level, say the amount of centers there are, or the number of people, or the number of PhD graduates in Buddhist studies get pumped out of universities, doesn't necessarily, to me, indicate a real taking on of the principles of the Buddha. Whereas I think a commitment to generosity and sharing and real fundamental kindness and virtue are, that's when it's really seeping into the cells and the bones, and that's to me is really important, and to be able to have places that model that. And of course, monasteries model that to a degree, to a large degree, but to be able to have a within the lay society, to be able to model that and to set those examples is, to me, extremely important and wonderful to see. Of course, I was trained in Thailand. I lived there for 23 years, so that was what I grew up with, and that I think one of the things that is important in the way we perceive our own practice is when we perceive that we're practicing in order to give to the practice rather than to get something from it, and that's a very different shift, and it's when I think that's when we really start growing, is when we recognize that I can be the different, and taking the different opportunities to give to the practice, give to situations that support practice, give to however the teachings are manifest, and so that having a retreat center like this, which is really going to be an opportunity for people to give, to share, to support, and be a part of. So that, because that's really where community is built. When we give and come from that heart of generosity, there's a connection that grows as just very natural as human beings. It's so that, and I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of challenges and glitches and various difficulties. Because it is a new model, but I think having the commitment to that, and having I mean, this, I assume, is really a core group of family that has been a part of supporting this and you know, as a having the opportunity to help each other bring this to the I mean to the kind of Santa Cruz Mountains, to kind of the peninsula area, to Bay Area, to America. I mean, it's these are things that you can all be sharing and giving, and recognizing that one is giving to something that is actually it's not personal. I think that's one of the things that is important. That when we can, you know, what comes to mind is there's a after the Buddha was enlightened, the Buddha was reflecting on his own kind of, on a certain level, a dilemma. Here he is, fully enlightened being, and he'd been looking for enlightened teachers, he'd been looking for enlightened friends, he'd been looking for other awakened beings, and he hadn't really found them. And then after his commitment to practice and training and his wisdom and effort came to fruition in his own awakening and liberation, is thinking, you know, who do I, you know, it's natural for us as human beings to want to pay respects, to give respect to others. Now, who do I respect? And when I look around, I don't see anybody else who's awakened. And then he continues his reflection and says, well, you know, what is worthy of my, always worthy of my respect is the Dhamma. You know? This truth, these teachings, this a reality of existence. And so that he always held Dhamma as what was always foremost in his mind. So what accorded with truth, what accorded with reality, this is what the Buddha always referred back to. And of course that's a wonderful example for all of us. We're looking for what is it that accords with Dhamma, what is it that accords with truth, and to be able to be respectful, to be deferential, to hold that dear, and to look for the ways that we can accord with that truth, so that we align with it. So our practice ends up being not just a meditation technique or a retreat that we do from time to time, but it's all of our actions of body, speech, and mind that we bring into our daily life. And of course, that's what comes into our practice. When we're able to really hold that clearly, when we come to sit and meditate, it's actually not that complicated. I was talking to the monks the other day, and I was saying how frustrating it was sometimes being with Ajahn Chah and asking for meditation instruction, and Ajahn Chah sort of, you know, because when he would give meditation instruction, it would be sort of like, well, you know, you sit down cross-legged, and then you keep your posture erect and alert, and then you pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath, and then you do that again, and then your mind gets peaceful. Yeah. You know, and what's the big deal? But it's so it's because it's, I think again he's sort of using because we tend to think, what sort of, I'm not getting quite the right technique, or I haven't quite got the right method, so I need another method to augment my spiritual practice, so I can get my mind peaceful. But if we come back a few steps and come those foundations of respect, of reverence, of having that fundamental right view of what is it that's really true, what is it that's worthy of our attention, what is it that is actually truly beneficial and worthwhile, and that's a, so that when one sits meditation, it's not very complicated. You keep. There's a lot of joy and light that comes from that. So coming back to fundamental principles, and particularly those themes of generosity and virtue, goodness. These are fundamentals that really nurture the heart, and being able to both, it's a practice, it's training that we keep plugging that in, but then it's also, as manifest here, learning how to take the opportunity to give, so that it's a benefit to others, and that's a source of great clarity, really, because the mind becomes very, there's a joy that's there, and those are there's a tendency for us, and it really is us, of the I think just in the human condition, and us as meditators, and certainly myself as beginning practice, of really thinking, when I get my meditation together, I'm going to be happy. and it's it's that's a valid hope. But the Buddha doesn't actually teach that way, because what he teaches is that get your happiness together and your meditation sorted out. And it's really, it's very interesting. It's stock phrases in the suttas that many discourses where he begins with, these are sort of again, setting out the different conditions, the conditioned nature of the mind, and he begins from different places, like the virtue or wise reflection, or even sometimes from dukkha, from suffering. But it's through faith, confidence. But then it goes into different starting points, but then it goes into these stock phrases with these different conditions. There's the arising of well-being and pamoja, and with the arising of well-being, then there's what comes to be is a quality of joy. With joy as a condition, there's the arising of tranquility. With tranquility as a condition, there's the arising of happiness. With happiness as a condition, there's the arising of samadhi, or of stability of mind, concentration, meditative stillness. And at some of the discourses, the Buddha actually stops there, and he actually explicitly sort of says, the happy mind is easily concentrated, and it's so that sense of attending to the things that nurture those qualities of well-being, and we're thinking of the aspects of respect and reverence. The Buddha, there's a discourse where the Buddha points to 5 things which are, say, worthy of reverence. Of course, and one is the teacher, the Tathagata, the Buddha himself, and the Dhamma, the teachings, Sangha, the community that has held the teachings, and then the next one is the training, sort of in the sense of one has that kind of respect and reverence to the recognition that what the Buddha has given us is a training, because so many religions, philosophies, have and intelligent people can really talk about high ideals and how the world should be and how you should be, but the Buddha doesn't really approach it from that way. He said, "Here's a training. Take this, take the human condition, and work within it, train within it, develop the skills of being a wise human being, and there'll be fruits." So that sense of that respect for training. And then the last thing that the Buddha says is worthy of respect and reverence is the qualities of hospitality is maybe a way to translate it. And sort of like looking after others. So that again, the sense of this is a place that's being created, that you can take those principles and bring that sense of implementing that respect, and then giving other people the opportunity to come into contact with something where there is this respect for the Buddha, for say an example of an awakened being in the world, the Dhamma, the teachings, the Sangha, the training itself, and that sense of welcoming and being one who is, because that's where that generosity comes in, is that sense of honoring and welcoming, creating a space that where people feel welcomed and looked after. So that these aspects of our of our practice, these are things that again it's helpful to keep things practical. It's like we're down having tea with Gil before coming up here, and so, Gil, what you really need is a maintenance manual. You need a database and a maintenance manual. I mean, these are so that these are. I think the Buddha has a similar kind of approach where there are these opportunities we have for peace and tranquility and meditation, but yeah, we'd also have to learn to look after things in a practical way, and particularly when it's like a meditation center. There'll be many people that will be here, and just everybody learning how to take it on or perceive it as our retreat center. It's not Gil's retreat center. It's sort of like our retreat center, so that people are willing to help out and take responsibility. And that and it's just I gave a reflection to the monks this morning on in the early morning after our breakfast. I give a short reflection, and one of the other senior monks or somebody will give a short reflection on how to take things into daily life, and sort of how to apply the teachings in our ongoing practice of living together in the monastery. And I used the theme of a cartoon that the assistant abbot Ajahn Pasanno just got from his mother. And the cartoon is of it's like in a Christian setting, environment, and there's looks like a senior monk in the front, and then sort of kind of a row of other monks in front of him, and the caption is most of you, some of you newcomers will know our philosophy here. Monkey see, monkey do. Which is, I thought was, they may not have, I mean, it was done as a play on words, they may not have actually seen the implications of it. That sense of, oh yeah, you see something that needs to be done, and you do it. And you see something that should be rectified, should be fixed, and you do it. And that's that taking responsibility and taking it on, and everybody helping, sort of that sense of it. When we all live in a place and we perceive it as ours, and that's what community is in Sangha, where we really take responsibility for each other and for the place. So that's important. And there's a phrase that Ajahn Amaro used to use from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was when something wasn't being done, or something was being left, or something was being assumed but being neglected. It gathers an SEP field around it, which an SEP field is somebody else's problem. So that in a place like this, in a retreat center, and just people keeping their eyes open, making sure that SEP fields aren't sort of coming into being in different places. So that these are ways of reflecting and perceiving the actual place that we practice and train in, and is a training. And when that's taken as a training, then you start seeing, I give to the training. It isn't sort of I get from the, because you do get from the training, but you get in the same, you get back what you put into it. So that sense of really paying attention to how one is giving to it. Because in the end, it's, it really is a lot of the practice, the tools that we rely on are the tools of renunciation. I think I'm assuming that everybody here is here on the first retreat, and you've all been practicing for a long time. Got a lot of experience in practice, and but it's really, I think, important to be recognizing that our practice has to be grounded in a certain ethos, and so that so both that ethos of giving, but then also giving up, of renunciation. And if renunciation isn't palatable, that relinquishment, letting go, these are they have a similar. Because sometimes we think, renunciation, I'm really losing something, I'm giving up something, but it's actually what one relinquishes is that releasing of that which is a burden anyway. So it's an incredible relief when we recognize, I was really able to put that down, and the mind becomes even brighter. Ajahn Chah used to say that there's only two things you need to do in practice: know and let go. Just those two things: that establishing of awareness, establishing of clarity, and establishing of attention, so that there's a clear knowing, and then a letting go, a relinquishing, a willingness not to cling on to, whether it's externally in terms of the world or objects of our senses, or internally, our own opinions, views, moods, feelings, projections, whatever. It's not that we don't have them or that they're not there, but they're held in a place of knowing and letting go. So you don't have to actually push anything away. You don't need to. You don't need to try to get rid of anything, because one, it isn't yours anyway, and it isn't stable either. So that was like one time, the very first time that Ajahn Chah went to England. This was his first trip to the West, and then it was actually at a Tibetan retreat center, monastery as well. There was a monastic presence, and somebody came to ask a question about practice, and they asked Ajahn Chah, how do I just have such a problem with anger and ill will, and how do I deal with it? How do I get rid of it? How do I let go of it? And Ajahn Chah said, that's easy. He said, just next time you get angry, just get an alarm clock and set it for 2 hours, and see if you can hold that mood for 2 hours. See if you can do that. Which was sort of just the total opposite of what of course, what the person was, thinking or assumed. Ajahn Chah would probably give some kind of, oh, you just need to develop loving kindness or blah 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 blah, and it's just pointing really directly at the impermanent, unstable, uncertain nature of whatever we experience, and even the moods that you think define yourself. They're not stable. They're not. I mean, they're there because we keep identifying with them, but that doesn't make them stable. It just means we identify with them. So it's seeing clearly. Oh wow, that's its nature. And of course, you start seeing things in accordance with Dharma, and that's really the function of our practice. So that as we continue to brand, how many days is this retreat for? 3 nights. Yeah. So that you've got these 3 nights, and to take the time to be practicing and cultivating, but pay attention to the meditation, pay attention to the technique, pay attention to the kind of the effort and energy that you put into it, but pay attention to how you hold the practice itself. There's a very beautiful, very short discourse in the Samyutta Nikaya, where and it's at the beginning with there's a lot of poems and verses, and a lot of them are quite short, and this one is in the Deva Samyutta, so it's sort of the discourses and conversations that the Buddha had with Devas. And anyway, there's many of them are poems that are, or verses that are presented to the Buddha as a expression of that being's understanding or that person's understanding, and then the Buddha will either approve of it, or he'll kind of try to correct that so that it's more beneficial. And and then this one particular discourse is one where it's sort of as if smitten by a sword, as if one's head were on fire. The monk should wander mindfully for the relinquishing of sensual desire. And you think, that's pretty good. That effort and that focus on sensual desire, which the Buddha points to as a basis of suffering. But the Buddha immediately takes it and basically repeats it, phrase as if smitten by a sword, as if one's head were on fire, the monk should wander mindfully for the overcoming of identity view. So it's that identity is the desire. Yeah, I mean it's there, but what feeds it is the identification. And all the other manifestations of the kind of the stains of the mind are not so much they obviously have their painful result and complication and whatnot, but what really feeds it is that identification and that identity. This is mine. This is who I am. This is myself. That's that fundamental misapprehension of truth, of kind of the way things are. We say when we take Dhamma as refuge, then it's not just in abstract teachings. it's in the the kind of fundamental view of how how the world works, how us as human beings work, and to be able to keep returning to that investigation of where are those seeds of identification. And of course, this is where the Buddha, there's many different ways that the Buddha points to, but one of the most frequent is the say the five khandhas, five aggregates of being: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, and the different ways that we create that sense of identity. This is who I am. I'm my body, or I have a painful feeling, and it's just I'm oppressed by this painful feeling, or I'm able to experience this happiness and well-being, and so this is who I really am. But it's that kind of slipping into the identification that is the problem, because it sets oneself up for separation from what one has perceived as reality, and then this bumping up to things not being the way one wants them to be. So that sense of investigation of what we identify with, how we do it, and there's a discourse where the Buddha points to there's a certain principle that the Buddha talks about in many places, which is in the scriptural language, it's a Dhammanu Dhamma Patibhata, practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. So that in itself is a kind of a mouthful to reflect on. But it's actually one of the conditions that the Buddha points to as a condition for the arising of stream entry. So that there actually the Buddha points to two external conditions, two internal conditions. One is the drawing close to association with good beings, with good spiritual beings, and then hearing the true Dhamma, hearing good teachings, and then so that those are external conditions. Internal conditions are wise reflection, skillful attention, and then the last one of practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. And because you reflect on it, there's so many ways that Dhamma can be. We can practice Dhamma with confusion. We can practice Dhamma with greed. We can practice Dhamma out of compulsion. We can practice Dhamma out of feeling of duty, and all these different ways we can do it. But that practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma, when the Buddha defines it, he said it's just taking these five aggregates of being and reflecting, investigating, contemplating these five aggregates of being, and so that we practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma is say manifested or implemented by this contemplation of form, the body, physical form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. And so when one contemplates those aggregates of being over and over, more and more clearly, one understands them. And one understands these 5 aggregates of being. And when one understands form, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness, one is released from them. And so it's this willingness to sort of being, and when one is released from them, one is released from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, all of the things where we really want, we should be willing to be done with. So that sense, oh yeah, these are fundamentals of the practice. And so bringing it back to that fundamental, just knowing and letting go, knowing and letting go. And it's that knowing of these, it isn't sort of the kind of astute accumulation of more philosophical debate, but it's coming back and investigating our own experience, and we've, so that we have all of the basis of our say successful and fruitful practice right here with this body, this mind. It's not far away. It's not, and it's not anywhere else. So we can be using these circumstances, both in terms of retreat, formal meditation, but that same contemplation, learning how to carry that into our interactions, a taking on of responsibility, of being a human being. One of the teachers in Thailand, Ajahn Buddhadasa, one of the ways that he would say that, say from the scriptural language, the word that is used as the human being is someone with a kind of a developed heart, and that's that's what defines us as human beings. And one is that we are capable of developing our hearts and developing our wholesome qualities, and that we take that opportunity and use it. So that as having taken human birth and then had the opportunity to come into contact with the Buddhist teachings and come into contact with situations that are able to support us in our practice, then to put forth the effort, and then also be able to share it with others. So I think I'll leave it there for today.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Pasanno, for
Yeah.
coming and honoring us with this wonderful talk, and as we begin our centuries-long caretaking of the Dharma here.
Yes, I mean that's the thing. This is we have no idea where this is going. And it's great. These are such early days of. You think of the taking of Buddhism into China, and it took several hundred years to before it really kind of took hold and started to gain momentum. And actually, even now, one of the things Reverend Heng Sure told me is that in China, Buddhism is still registered as a foreign religion. So it's And places like Tibet, Japan. I mean, these sort of, it's always, you look at the history, and it's always gone in waves, and it takes time to really put down roots. And say, like in Thailand, there's no real clear understanding of when Buddhism really came and how it was established. They don't have a sense of a historical sense, so that a lot of it goes sort of into mythology, and it's only really clear around the 12th or 13th century that there's starting to be real written chronicles. Here in America, it's still very early days.
It might be useful for us to remember that we're kind of novices. That we're not going to figure it out in our generation, in our lifetime.
Yeah.
We're laying the groundwork so it can.
Yeah, and that's why that my things that I was speaking about, really trying to get people to reflect that what the foundations are, and recognizing that the foundations that you lay for other people they can continue to build on that, and those principles, when they're laid down, they're not really they don't get worn out. It's like Ajahn Chah used to say that one of the images that he used of practicing so that our our practice is grounded in Dhamma. He said it's like you really want to be encouraging yourself to really ground it in true Dhamma, practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. He said because it's like if you've got because we all exist on water, we need to have drinking water, so that one of the things that is commonly used in Thailand for drinking water is to have these big earthen jars collect rainwater, which you then use through the year, which is great. Rainwater is very pure, but if there's a long dry season, you run out, or it gets broken somehow, and you run out of water. And he said you need to be able to really put the effort in to dig a well where the water is right down into the water, where it's right down in the water table, and that the water is always there for you. He said that's when we practice Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma, it's like having a well that's always, the water is always there for you. It's right down to the roots. Do you want to open it up for questions, or?
Yes, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'm happy to come all this way. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody wants.
Bhante, would you give an example of practicing Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, sort of a everyday example that we could know what you mean by that?
Well, I think, a lot of things that I even said in terms of not letting SEP fields gather around things. So somebody will do it. Whereas seeing something and saying, oh, that needs to be done, I'll do it. Now that sort of, it comes from, there's a certain clarity, a willingness to sort of give up one's own kind of, because everybody wants to be comfortable, not have to do much. So I mean that in itself, coming back into this is rooted in Dhamma, or the choices that we make in terms of virtuous conduct and precepts. It isn't sort of a moral principle that I've got to hold because there's some Buddha or Bodhisattva holding the club of the precepts over you. It's sort of like, this is how to act with integrity. This is how to act with a care for others. That's like one of the things that the ways that the Buddha talked about precepts as being the 5 great gifts. So that the gift of sort of like the 5 precepts being action that is a giving of security, a giving of safety, a giving of trust, and that's in accordance with Dhamma. So rather than we're keeping precepts because we feel guilty if we don't, or fearful for some reason or other, or any number of reasons, but that it's that rooted in recognizing that this is conduct that's in accordance with Dhamma and in accordance with truth, and then it becomes this wonderful gift. Because the degree of trust and dynamics of human interactions change. There's a really great example of that with Master Shu Yun, who was a very revered Chinese monk from last century into the middle. He lived to be 120, and many incredible stories about him. But one of the things that he did a lot of pilgrimages, these 3 steps and 1 bow across China, and then he did a lot of traveling sometimes to establish monasteries or teach meditation retreats. There's a transcript of a meditation retreat that he gave when he was 114 or 116 or something. But on one of these occasions when he was traveling, he was on a bus, and it was in the period of kind of the conflict between the nationalists and the communists, and a lot of instability in the country. And there was so a group of bandits stopped the bus and got on board, and they had weapons and they were taking valuables from everybody. And then Master Su Yun was sitting, and they came up to him, and they sort of saw he was a monk, and an old monk, and he said, Reverend, Venerable, we don't, we're sorry, we don't want to kind of inconvenience you, or this, but this is kind of, it's not great conduct, but that's what we're about these days, and we respect you and don't want to harm you, so we'll just leave you as you are. And Master Su Yun just sort of looked at them very, kind of kindly, and said, if you really believe that, you would give all of that back to these people. And that was it. And then that would just totally confuse them and befuddle them. And then they just started giving it all back. And then got off the bus. So I'm sure there was what the heck happened there? But it's sort of like that contact with somebody who really holds virtue. It has a different feeling. So it's a gift, incredible gift.
So part of what I hear you saying is that practicing Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma isn't some deeply esoteric thing that will confuse us and like we have to.
I hope. Yeah, I hope not.
No. Yeah. So it could be something as direct as following integrity.
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. Because I think that's. There's certain equations that we follow. No pain, no gain. If I'll be happy when I get my meditation together, the more complicated I can think about this, the more profound it must be. Those are all they're good. They're assumptions to be reflected on.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, you got one. Okay.
Well, you talked about how people meditate in order to become happy, and Ajahn Chah said, well, be happy and then you can meditate with more concentration. I would gather it's sort of a little bit of both, that each helps the other. You kind of a feedback loop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then gradually make progress.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's the nature of the Buddha's path. That there are these loops going around, and that was actually Ajahn Chah's first trip to the West. Went to England, and rather than stoplights, they got all these traffic circles, and he said, "Oh, this is just like Dhamma. It's just like the Eightfold Path, and it's always it's always these loops going around." And that really is. It's always feeding back, and if you think it's point A to point B like this, and that's when it gets a bit complicated. When you realize, so it's like learning how to plug into the things that keep those feedback loops going, feeding, giving nutriment to.
So it can be kind of hard to know where to begin in Dhamma, but maybe it doesn't have.
Well, the thing is you don't actually have to know, in the sense of, if you're looking for the absolute beginning and then really defining the end really clearly. I mean, the end has a certain feeling, but that sense of, but if you pick up the path at any point, it leads you in, and you just keep developing it. It's just like, picking up, there's a corner here, and it's just, it's only a little bit, but if I start pulling on it, the whole thing's going to go. It's just, so that's the same in our practice. Just starting in any place where it makes sense, then you start to realize how it connects together, and because that's the conditioned nature of the teachings and the path, the conditioned nature of truth. They're interwoven, interlocking aspects of these conditions. Okay, so I'll take leave of you all and enjoy the rest of your retreat.